You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hi, this is Katie from Queen's Podcast. Just a heads up, our show does include some strong language. So if you're uncomfortable with that, this might not be the show for you. Cheers, bitches! Hi, this is Katie.
And this is Nathan.
And you're listening to Queen's Podcast, the show about badass women in history. All right, so 2019.
Hooty hoo!
First episode of 2019, and she's a doozy.
Yeah, bitches, we're back.
So, who are we talking about today, Nathan?
So, we're talking about Mary, Queen of Scots.
Well, first, let's thank our Patreon supporters.
So, shout out to our Empress supporters, Anastasia, or Anastasia. I'm always going to do this with her name.
Anastasia.
Angelica, Brianna, Brendan, Charity, Courtney, Anita, Heather, Her Royal Highness, Jackie, Jared, Kelly, Cara, Kristen, Lizzie, Maureen, Megan, Sarah, Kate, Tiffany, and Yen.
And then to our Queen Consorts, Alexis, Amanda, Anna, Claire, Danny, Erin, Haley, Helene, Jaime, Jamie, Yara, Jessica B, and Jessica M, Jose, Kat, La Michelle, Megan, Melissa, Stephanie, Taylor, Terry, and Queen Toby.
We also have a correction.
Yeah, listener Teresa wrote to us about the Freddie Mercury episode. His lover for the last few years of his life was named Jim, but we called him Tim.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's because my brother's name is Tim, and I just, made a little slippy.
Yeah, so sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks for the correction, Teresa.
Yeah.
So, Mary Queen of Scots, and what are you drinking today?
Nathan is drinking gasoline. So what it is I Googled Scotch drinks, and then Mary Queen of Scots cocktail came up, so I was like, bonus for the win. And it's 2 shots of Scotch, 1 shot of green chartreuse, which I just thought was a fucking color. But apparently it's a liqueur that's marinated with 100 and something different herbs and spices.
It's a bougie liqueur.
Yeah, and it's actually from her time period.
Oh, okay.
So it was distilled and started the recipe in her time period. So that's why I think the recipe was created.
Cool.
And I think I remember reading in the description is what you drink next to on a cold night next to a warm fire. I'm like, bitch, you could start a fire with this shit.
Yeah. So I'm doing a dry January because my liver had enough. Yeah. But I'm going to have a sip just so I know what we're doing.
Oh, God.
I don't think I'm going to like it.
No, you're not. I can already tell you. Yeah.
No? Oh, what is that aftertaste?
Gasoline.
Yep. No, but it's got a black licorice aftertaste to it, which I hate, so.
Yeah, licorice is always one of those candies that as a kid you're like, why the fuck do you like licorice?
No. So I don't think I would ever order that restaurant myself.
Or ever?
It's not a cocktail that I'm like, you know what, I'm going to break my dry January for that, so. But
I will give a shout out to green chartreuse. It does taste good by itself.
You're expanding your horizons.
Yes.
You're learning about cocktails.
And bitch, that shit was expensive.
So, Mary Queen of Scots. So just disclaimer, anybody who watches Reign, this is not the story that you think it is.
Katie's gonna throw some shade on Rach because it is some garbage. But I love garbage.
I watch a lot of garbage TV. So
I could name a list.
No hate on people who like that show. It is a fun show to watch. It's just not the story we're going to tell.
No, not
today.
at all. Don't take that as historical fact because it's not.
So she was born in real life. She was born December 8th, 1542, and she became Queen of Scotland 6 days later.
This baby's got a job, bitch.
Baby's got a job, bitch. Baby's got a job,
bitch.
Yep. Her father was James V of Scotland, and her mother was Mary of Guise. So let's talk about mom and dad
Let's
a
spill
little bit.
some tea about them.
Yeah.
So James was the King of Scotland at about 1 year old.
What is up with all these babies with jobs. That baby had a job, bitch.
Baby had a job, bitch. So, sorry, guys. I need to pull myself together.
Our single is dropping. Baby got a job, bitch.
So this was very common for the Stuart dynasty, to be honest.
Yeah, like it kept happening to them.
Mm-hmm. And James's mom was Margaret Tudor, the sister of Henry VIII.
So the Stuarts have kind of a claim to
Yeah,
the
so she's
English
basically
throne.
like cousins.
Yeah, they're cousins. Henry VIII is her great uncle.
Yeah, exactly. So James had a tendency to sleep with women outside of his marriage and have a fuck ton of illegitimate children.
Well, his first illegitimate child, because he was made king so young, and his regents, whenever he was teenage king, wanted to keep him not interested in ruling. So they kept throwing mistresses at him. I think he fathered his first illegitimate child when he was like 15 or something like that.
Whoa.
Yeah. But obviously none of those illegitimate children could like inherit, like ever hope to be king.
No.
Because they were illegitimate. That's how history worked.
Yeah.
Her mom was Mary of Guise, and I do want to cover Mary of Guise one day. She's a very interesting lady.
Yeah, we've talked about the Guise family in the past, a little bit in our Catherine de Medici episode.
Yeah, a little bit. Kind of touched on it.
Yeah, but it's a very interesting family, and
they're just super powerful and bougie.
Very bougie.
Dripping in bouge, they were.
Yeah.
They considered themselves just as noble as the royal family, and they were powerful and rich.
So there's this story that Henry VIII actually wanted her mom,
Mary of Guise,
to be his bride.
After Jane Seymour died, I think. After Jane Seymour died, and he was like searching around, because Mary of Guise was very tall, and he was like, I'm a big man, I need a big woman. And the story goes that she wrote back like, I might be a big woman, but I have only a very little neck.
Ooh!
You burnt.
Burn!
Obviously, that's, referencing Anne Boleyn. Like, why would I marry you? You cut one of your wife's heads off. What are you thinking, psycho?
That is not the thing that I admire in a man.
No, yeah. So, you burnt Henry, one of the great disses of history.
And I love it. I'm here for it.
She's sassy.
So, mom and dad had 3 children in total. But Mary was actually the only one to live on to adulthood.
Yeah. I just put, in our outline, this picture of James V. Like, whoever did this portrait, like, I didn't read anything to indicate that James V had a lazy eye. But this portrait, like, can you just imagine being James V being like, the fuck was my eyes, bro? Like, why did you...
Do I really look like that?
Why did you paint it that way?
Has nobody told me that I look like this?
So let's see. What did Mary look like?
So she was tall.
She was so tall.
She was 6 fucking feet tall.
This is a time when the average man was like 5'8". So for a woman, I mean, it's a 6 foot tall woman is really tall in today's standards.
Yeah.
You know?
And not only that, but she was gorgeous. Everybody that ever described her was always like, she's so pretty, she's got auburn hair, brown eyes.
She had a really infectious personality too.
Yeah.
So that, because somebody can look not that stunning to you, but then you get to know them and you're like, oh my god, she's so gorgeous, because
but
they're
even
so
in the opposite, you can meet somebody that's absolutely stunning, but then whenever you go talk to them, they're like a fucking void of any personality.
So she was beautiful on the outside and was very attractive personality too.
Yes.
Pale, light skin, which at the time was...
I mean, she's Scottish. I mean, she's got auburn hair, pale skin, brown eyes.
Yeah. She was gorgeous. If she was around today, I think she would either be a runway model or a professional volleyball player.
Yeah.
Because she was also super athletic. She loved riding. And
yeah, she definitely loved horses.
Going, like, just playing different sports. So she kept a really trim figure her whole life, too. When she was born... her dad was off fighting a war with England.
Because that's what you do.
That's just sort of what you do when you're from Scotland back then. Or France. Or Spain.
Or everybody. Everybody fucking hates England, so let's all go attack them.
Especially Scotland and England. They have basically been on again, off again.
I mean, they still are.
I mean, they're not at war.
They're not at war, but they still kind of have, like, we want to be independent.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Yeah. So, James is off a-warring, and he gets sick, and, like, he's on his deathbed. A messenger comes to tell him, your wife has given birth to a daughter. And he supposedly said, it came with a lass, and it'll go with a lass.
I wish I could make you do it in a Scottish accent.
I'm not gonna. I have been watching a lot of Outlander lately, but I'm not gonna.
So that's a little bit of a weird thing to say.
I know. Well, what it meant, like, the royal family, the Stuart dynasty started in a maternal line. Mm-hmm. So he was saying, like, the Stuart dynasty started with a lass, it'll go with a woman, but it's why the fuck would he say that? I don't totally buy it.
My dynasty's gonna start with a woman and end with a woman. Bitch, it started with a woman and it started again with a woman.
Like, it's just a weird thing for him to say, so it makes a fun story.
But he also had some haters, aka John Knox, who possibly could have made this whole thing up.
John Knox is a dude that we'll talk more on episode 2 of Mary Queen of Scots.
He's a douche canoe.
He is a douche canoe, and he hated Mary. And so it's completely possible that this is, like, something that he started years and years, like a story that he started years and years later.
So anyway, she's 6 days old and she's fucking queen.
Like one does.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, like, the changes in religion at this time.
Yeah, we've talked about this in a bunch of our different episodes. Catherine de Medici, Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn.
Yeah, like, this was a big time, like, the Protestant Reformation was just spreading like wildfire throughout England. Basically, the Protestant Reformation was like Beatlemania. Like, everybody, Calvinism rolls through your town, and all the teenage girls are out there screaming, like, oh my God, it's Paul McCartney! Yes.
And so Mary is on the Catholic side of this. Mm-hmm. Because her mom is super duper 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 Catholic.
Yeah, the Guise family of France were super Catholic. Mm-hmm. And
Scotland's actually leaning in to the Protestant side of it. Mm-hmm. So that's creating a little bit of conflict.
Maybe it'll be important later. Let's see.
I don't know. So obviously Mary can't do a whole bunch of, ruling at the age of 6 years old. That's not going to happen. No. So she has to have people, regents, that, take her place and make decisions for her. Mm-hmm. And the first one was this dude named the Earl of Arran. And the Earl of Arran was actually the next in line.
Yeah.
To the throne.
And he was Protestant.
Yeah.
And he was very pro-England.
England.
Because a lot of people, England wanted the two royal houses to unite and become one, country, basically.
Yeah, so the Earl of Arran ends up, like, playing Let's Make a Deal. Yeah. And is like, hey, Henry VIII, you have a new son named Edward. How about we marry Scotland and England together and marry baby Mary to
Baby Edward
and unite the countries.
Baby royal wedding.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
And so the Earl has this secretly under the table, signs this treaty called the Treaty of Greenwich.
Yes.
And it didn't really hold any water because he didn't pass it through Parliament. But basically what it did was, it united the two royal families and had betrothed the two baby monarchs to each other.
And I don't really think Scotland would have been cool about this.
Oh, they were not. No, you think correctly. Scotland, the Scottish people were like, you did what now? Like, come again? I'm sorry, I must have misunderstood you. You did what?
Excuse me?
Yeah, they were like, absolutely not. They were not down with it. So, long and confusing story short, Scotland pulls out of the Treaty of Greenwich, and Scotland and England go to war again.
This is we make this Forrest Gump reference so much, but it's true.
Or he's like, and I went to the White House again.
Because guess what? History repeats itself.
Yeah. So.
And fucking Scotland and England go into war again.
There was this alliance between Scotland and France called the Old Alliance.
Yes.
And in Scottish it's spelled A-U-L-D, but it's
Just say old.
It's pronounced old.
Yeah.
It means old.
No, Old Lang Syne.
Yeah,
the New Year's song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Which,
same thing.
What the fuck is that song about? Old acquaintance be forgotten, never brought to mind. Like,
just...
who are these shady bitches that we just don't want to think about it anymore? Like,
who's this hoe that wrote the song?
Whatever. Anyway, but yeah, so their alliance was basically just the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yes, and
so it's basically...
This has been around since, like...
The 1200s.
1200s,
yeah,
you know, this has always been going on.
It is an old alliance. It is indeed an old alliance.
Indubitably.
Indubitably. And so, Scotland was like, hey, France, we need to, like, revamp the old alliance because England's going a little psycho on us right now.
Yeah, and then Mary of Guise steps in and is like... I got this shit.
I got this. These are my peeps.
So I'm gonna betroth my sweet baby girl to the guy in France,
yes.
the king in France's son, because honestly, I think Mary of Guise saw Henry VIII and was like, this bitch is killing people left and right.
Yeah.
Like, she burned him for that.
Yeah,
she knows that he's fucking psycho. And she's like, am I really gonna... I didn't want to marry him. Would I want my daughter to marry him?
Or his children.
I mean, yeah, his children? Fuck no.
No, absolutely not. And also, I mean, the people of Scotland didn't want to be English.
No.
You know, they didn't want...
They're perfectly fine being Scottish, thank you.
So, she is just like, I'm going to betroth my daughter to heir of France. Bada bing, bada boom. We get protection, and France sends over troops.
So this was called the rough wooing at the time.
Henry's reaction to the revamping of the old alliance is called the rough wooing, which is a cute little name for Henry trying to burn Scotland to the ground. It's basically what...
Minimalize.
He's like a fucking toddler, except he's a fucking toddler with an army.
Yeah.
So when he doesn't get his way, he's just like, well, I'll just kill you all. Ha-ha.
Ha-ha. I'm awesome.
No, like, literally, England invades Scotland, and I mean, in 1544... they nearly burnt the city of Edinburgh completely to the ground.
That's crazy.
It's like everything except for the castle was just annihilated.
What, they trying to be Boudica or something?
I guess. But, I mean, Mary of Guise was like, all right, this put the fear of God in her. She was like, all of this carnage and burning to the ground over my baby daughter? No, she's going overseas where you can't touch her. We gotta get her to
next to a nice, strong French army.
Place. And, I mean, all of Mary's family, Mary of Guise's family, is still over there in France. Yeah. And she knows the French royal family.
Mary Queen of Scots' grandmother is in France.
Yeah, like...
So that's where I would naturally send my daughter.
Yeah, so she was like, all right, sweet baby Mary, you're 5 years old. It's time for you to go be raised in France now.
Yes.
So long story short.
Yeah, very long.
Mary of Guise is made regent, and pretty much just the Earl of Arran kept fucking up. So
yeah, and she's, like we discussed before, she's Catholic, and she's foreign. She's from France, and
at the beginning, she's pretty popular as a regent.
Yeah, and but she's in Scotland, who's a Protestant country. So yeah. I mean, all the cards are stacked against her, but she actually does a pretty good job.
So she sends baby Mary off, and baby Mary arrives in France and is formally betrothed to the Dauphin of France.
The Dauphin
of France. Flipper.
Flipper.
No. His name was Francis. Francis of France, because we're just not creative with names. And she arrives in France on a ship that the King of France, who is also named Henry, sent her to travel on. This is the third episode where we talk about Henry II.
Yeah, we've talked about him a lot.
In the Catherine de Medici episode and the Diane de Poitiers episode.
Yep. And so remember, like, at this time, France is bougie AF.
It's the bougiest country in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Scotland was not. Scotland was considered kind of a redneck country.
It's like the trailer park down the street.
It's not fair, but that's how the rest of the world...
No, that's how they saw them.
Yeah. So I guess Henry thought the Scottish boats would just sink immediately. So he was like, all right, send her some boats, get her over here. And so she arrives.
I mean, to be fair...
Age 5.
To be fair, that trip from Scotland to France probably wouldn't be that awesome.
I mean, but it's not long. It's a lot shorter than, like, a trip from, like...
But that sea between France and England is supposed to be not a smooth sail. And she ended up boarding the ship with 4 of her friends, also named Mary.
Yeah, they were called the 4 Marys.
I wonder if she had, like, pet names for them. Like, you know, Sassy, Classy, Dopey, and Doc. You know, something like that.
Probably.
Because what do you say? Hey, Mary, come get me a soda.
And they're like, what?
Yeah.
What? They were Mary Seton, Livingston, Fleming, and Beaton. And most of them stayed in their service for the rest of their lives. Yeah,
her whole life. I don't want to spoil the whole story for you, but they were around for the rest of her life.
So Mary rocks up in France, and she is immediately a hit. Like, everybody loves her.
I think that they were expecting some bucktooth, you know, redneck girl, and then she steps off the boat and she's just 6 foot tall, auburn hair.
She's 5, so she's not. That'd be a very fucking tall 5-year-old.
Oh yeah, that.
But she's just this adorable little child who already speaks French because her mother taught her. And I even read somewhere that all of her friends got seasick and everybody got seasick. She didn't get seasick. She like immediately hits the scene in France, and everybody is like, "This kid is adorable.
This kid is the shit.
Love her."
Even the king was quoted as saying, "The little Queen of Scots is the most perfect child I have ever seen."
Which pissed off Catherine de Medici.
Because she has some children from... and she's like, what about our kids?
Yeah, all the daughters are like, "Cool, Dad. Thanks.
Fuckface. So, at French court, she rocks up with all these Scottish dudes, and the French people are like, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Do that again?
No.
Absolutely no.
No. Which is French for no.
Who are these friggin' Scottish hicks walking up in my court in kilts?
So, besides the 4 Marys, really most of her crew was sent back to Scotland. Like, and she like replaced with a French household. They were just like, thanks, but no thanks.
We really don't want your fucking hired help because it's disgusting.
Get them out of here. Mary took to France like a French fish to French water. Like, she was half French
like
herself.
Like a poisson to water?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, moving on.
So almost immediately after she's here, King Henry starts calling her the Queen of Scotland and England.
And the heir to England. And she's just 5 years old, so she's like, cool. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm fine.
So.
Where's the picture that I can color?
Yeah, more on this later. But she also hit it off with her baby fiance, Francis, right away.
And that's something that I found really interesting is that I think that they were friends.
Yeah, they were.
They loved each other.
They, they were friends immediately. None of that, like, silly childhood rivalry or anything like that.
They traveled around.
She was 5 and he was 4.
Yeah.
And she towered over him. But, like, at that age...
As a 5-year-old.
Yeah, but, I mean, she always was going to be tall.
Day.
I mean, you know, little girls are always taller than little boys at the beginning.
Yeah, usually.
And, but, yeah.
I wouldn't know this, I'm just short. So, yeah.
You're taller than me.
Well, Katie, that's not saying much. I hate to be a bitch.
Anyway.
So they were really friends. They were really close to each other.
I mean, they were raised like brother and sister. Whenever they were together, though, there was an obvious contrast because Mary was very outgoing and witty, even as a child, and Francis was a little bit more...
shy, reserved.
And Mary was healthy and cute, and Francis was a little sickly.
Had a stutter,
yeah.
But I think that's a good contrast. I mean, if you were to be married to somebody and you had a stutter and were shy, you would want to be married to somebody.
She was going to make him look better.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, by association. So let's talk about her education. She was schooled with the French royal children, so top notch.
Yes,
is what we're talking about here.
fucking notch. So French was her first language, but she did speak Old Celtic, Scottish, English, Latin, Spanish, Greek. Like, she learned every fucking language that she could at the time.
Religious studies were a big part of her education.
Yeah, usually they are in this time.
Yeah. And really in the time of, like, the different factions of Christianity, I think it was important to, like, know when, you know, the laws were still being created around religion. So,
and she did have that more right-brained aesthetic teachings where she had the dance,
sewing, instruments.
Yeah, she played the lute, I think. And she was apparently really good at it.
And she loved riding horses and hunting.
Yeah, and it's around this time that she developed her love for animals, especially dogs.
Woman after my own heart.
I know. Like, I read this and I was like, and I'm in love.
Yeah.
And she carried that love for her dogs till the day she died.
Yeah.
Like, period.
Sad. Anyway, more on that later.
And I also read that she did learn a little bit from Cardinal Guise, which I nicknamed Cardi Guise. So, Cardi Guise in the house. He actually taught her to be...
Little bitch.
He actually taught her to be merciful and lenient and, you know, listen to her subjects and not judge them. Very religious. But I found it kind of ironic because the Guise family is dramatic AF and they caused a lot of drama. And the fact that she got taught by Cardi Guise to keep it cool, it's like, but Cardi Guise turns around and makes a big old scene.
Yeah. Yes.
So, by the age of 12, she actually is starting to send letters home, signing them Marie R. And I was like, what the fuck, R? Why is she...
Regina.
Yeah, and it's Regina, so it's Maria Regina, which is Queen Mary.
Yeah.
So, she's at the age of 12 knowing, okay, I'm going to be Queen Mary of France.
Yes, I'm going to be Queen Mary of France. I'm already Queen Mary of Scotland.
Yeah, and so like we said... She already had family in France. Her grandmother's in France. And they're already super rich and powerful. So she's got it pretty much set up.
Yeah, so she is sitting pretty. Even though her mother remained in Scotland, they remained pretty close by writing letters. Her mother was still a huge influence on her life, if not, even though she wasn't physically present.
She wrote her all the time. I think the last time they saw each other was like at age 7 or something.
Yeah, her mother came
to
visit
each other
for a little bit.
To the day they, I mean, they wrote each other, period.
Yeah, the Guise family was really overreaching with their power over Mary.
Yeah, Cardi Guise.
Speaking of which, Catherine de Medici.
Yes.
Time to talk about Kathy de Medici and her relationship with Mary is usually painted as a really negative one. But also, Kathy kind of has that reputation in history of being like a bitch. So she's painted that way. I don't think their relationship was as volatile as people like to say. But I think, because Mary was above the French princesses at court. So I do think Kathy would have been a little bit about that, you know?
Yeah, so not only did King Henry declare that Mary would take precedence over her children, like Catherine de Medici's own children. Not only did he do that, he, like we said earlier, he said that, oh, this is the most beautiful child that I've ever seen. And then I think it's just Catherine de Medici already felt like she was taking a backseat with Diane de Poitiers.
She never felt like she was important in court. And so, now her children aren't important.
Yeah,
either.
And she's like, that was supposed to be my claim to fame, was my children, and now my children aren't even what the hell am I doing here?
And now all these Guise relatives are coming out of the woodwork, you know, grabbing at power. So I think Catherine de Medici's disdain for Mary had nothing to do with Mary, and it wasn't a disdain towards Mary.
It was her husband. She was mad at her husband.
She was mad at her husband and all these relatives coming out of nowhere.
Yes, exactly. So it had nothing to do with a baby, a little kid.
So remember how we said that when she first got there, Henry is like, you're Queen of Scotland and you're the heir to England, and lots of people did view her as the heir to England. So let's kind of talk about that.
Yeah, so we have Mary Tudor, Queen of England, aka Bloody Mary, which is a bad title.
By the time we're talking about right now, Henry VIII had died, but I think Edward was still on the
still
throne. Because Edward only lived to be like 15 or something. So maybe he's like 12 at this point or something like that.
Mary Tudor, aka Bloody Mary, which is a bad term for her.
Yeah.
But she's next in line. Everybody kind of knows Edward's sickly.
Yeah.
She's next in line, but she's also old and she's
never been of great health.
And she's probably not going to produce an heir.
And so the next in line after Mary Tudor, aka Bloody Mary, on the English throne is Elizabeth, who is the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn.
And her claim to the throne is pretty fucking shaky, guys.
Yeah, a lot of people don't view her... Well, one, no Catholic views her as legitimate. Even the popes, like, absolutely not. No. Because...
she has to be... If she's a monarch, she's Catholic.
Yeah.
Period.
Well, Edward is Protestant. And nobody's saying that he doesn't, but he's a boy. Mm-hmm. And his parents were definitely a legitimate marriage because both of King Henry VIII's previous wives had been dead. Elizabeth was born to a union that a lot of people just never viewed as a legitimate marriage
they didn't recognize
to begin with,
it. Mm-hmm.
because Henry VIII's first wife was still alive whenever he married Anne Boleyn. So, listen to our Anne Boleyn episode if this is confusing to you. But I think most people know who Elizabeth the first is. Yeah. So, anyway, that's what Francis was saying. He was like... Or not Francis, I'm sorry. That's what Henry II or Henri of France was saying. He was like...
you have more of a claim to the throne than Elizabeth I does.
So, if no heirs come up, you're going to be the next in line.
Basically, what it boils down to is Mary, Queen of Scots, would have had the Pope's support.
Exactly.
Period. The Pope!
So, by the 16th century standards, like, Elizabeth's claim was shaky. It didn't look like there was going to be any other heirs coming. So Henry II of France was setting Mary up to try to grab that throne.
Exactly.
For herself and for France.
So before the wedding, Henry convinces Mary that he needs to sign over the rights to Scotland. Oh, this gives me a migraine.
So she's 14. So Mary Queen of Scots is 14. And she didn't have any Scottish advisors with her.
They would have been against this.
A reoccurring theme in Mary's life is that she makes bad decisions.
Yeah.
And so this was a bad decision, but all her advisors were French. I couldn't find for sure if her mother advised her to sign this treaty or not. But, I mean, she may have. Mm-hmm. She didn't have any Scottish advisors. And Henry was like... So before you marry my son, I want you to sign over the rights to Scotland. And it basically was like, okay, if Mary Queen of Scots dies with no children, France would inherit the throne of Scotland.
Oh, that's a horrible deal.
Yeah.
That's like, let's make a deal on crack in hell.
But of course she signs it because she's 14 and this is the only father she's ever known.
Yeah, and he's obviously been like, yeah, sign the deal. Yeah, that looks good.
He's like, it's no big deal. And she's like, oh, if it's no big deal, okay, cool.
I love this little picture that you posted in here.
That meme with that guy being like, oh, baby, what is you doing?
Don't do that, bitch.
Don't do that.
Straight away. So, in 1558, Mary and Francis get married, and the fucking wedding is lit, fam. Mm-hmm. Like, it's crazy.
She's been in France for 10 years now, so these are her peeps.
Yeah, this was the big to-do in the fucking French quarters.
Yeah, so she was 15 and Francis was 14.
And they got married in Notre Dame
Cathedral because they bougie.
And Mary wore a white dress.
With a train.
Which,
and
we're sitting here going, oh, that's common.
Of course she wore a white dress with a train.
Yeah, white dress with a train. She's very ahead of her time.
She's very ahead of her time. I mean, basically, first of all, white was the color of mourning in France at the time. But she was basically just like, but I look really good in white.
So do you think, like, at the age of, like, 8 or 9, she's walking the streets of France, and then she sees some woman in mourning, and she's like, Oh my god, she looks fierce.
I want to get married in that.
She looks fierce.
No, have you ever seen the episode of The Office, Pam and Jim's wedding?
Mm-mm.
And I think it's Pam and Jim's wedding, and like Kelly Kapoor rocks up in a white dress, and they're like, "You're not supposed to wear white to a wedding." She goes, "I had an emergency," and later she was like, "The emergency? I look really good in white."
And that's pretty much what she did.
And yeah, she was like, "I look really good in white." She pulled a Kelly Kapoor.
She looked damn good,
and everybody who was anybody was there.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody who was anybody. And after
the royal family, the Guises,
the cardinals, the archbishops, other royal people, like everybody was there.
And then after the wedding, they basically had to parade down the streets of Paris and just...
And people are like... I mean, she is a celebrity.
I remember even reading that there were quotes from the people in Paris that were even saying, this is the most beautiful queen in Europe.
Yeah.
Ever. And then, obviously... Elizabeth I catches wind of that and is like, bitch.
They proceed to have a huge party, and it went well into the night. God, they didn't do the bedding ceremony like Catherine de Medici and Henry
disgusting.
II had to do.
That is like that is the stuff of my nightmares now.
Yeah,
I do not want that to happen to me ever.
At the reception, the first dance, which is usually supposed to be the married couple, King Henry actually danced with Mary instead because Mary towered over Francis.
Yeah. And
Mary was so graceful and good at dancing, and Francis was clumsy. And since there was everybody who was anybody that was there, Henry was like, I'm just gonna...
How flattering, though, for the King of France to be like, my son can't dance. Let me dance with you, darling. And you're like, oh my god, the King of France.
But also, hashtag poor baby Francis.
Yeah, poor little...
All right, so Queen and King Consort of Scotland is their new title, and she's now the Dauphine of France. Yeah, the King of France creates their joint coat of arms, and he puts in the English rose.
Yeah, he does the English rose, the like Scottish lion, and like the
unicorn. I don't fucking know.
And something the fleur de lis with French.
But anyway, so. Their wedding coincides with the first year of Elizabeth I's rule. And so, like, right out of the gates, she's like, oh, it's going to be like that, is it? With them putting...
They're overshadowing.
Or, well, they're claiming England.
Yeah.
And she's like... Oh, really? It's gonna be like that. So right away, people are pitting the two against each other, and
it's pretty easy to do, to be honest with you, because if you look at both of their history, like Mary grew up drama-free, Elizabeth had a lot of drama.
Elizabeth had a lot of drama in her life.
Mary grew up in cush-ass France. Elizabeth grew up in shit. Yeah. Mary had a good relationship with her mom. Elizabeth's mom is... head lobbed off.
Yeah.
Like, it's just an uphill climb for poor Elizabeth, and Elizabeth just sees Mary, and Mary
as like another... Well, Elizabeth, her entire life had to be like... She had to be smart, or she would have been executed.
I feel like the only reason that Elizabeth didn't like Mary is because Elizabeth saw Mary and was like, that's the life I should have had. That's the life that I should have.
I think maybe... in year one of her reign, them putting the English rose
that would have pissed me off.
I think that's why she didn't like Mary. But, you know, I do think she understood, okay, Mary is being ruled by the men in her life right now, so maybe she wouldn't have made it, like, took it too personally.
Yeah, and that's what I read, is I read that Elizabeth's court subjects were like, hey, the Guise families... You know, Cardi Guise is kind of cray.
Yeah.
And she's dramatic. And...
little bitch.
So it's not really her fault. Like, and it really wasn't. Like, it really wasn't, maybe.
These is cardinal shoes. Red hat. These is cardinal shoes.
Oh my god. I need to make a new single dropping on iTunes.
So, King Henry dies. This is the third time in the history of our podcast we are going to talk about this brutal fucking way to die.
I know. So, Home Dude thinks it's a great idea to be like, hey, there's a jousting tournament. I want to joust somebody. And he goes and picks somebody out of the crowd, like, let's joust. And they're like, No,
Why?
you're the king of fucking France.
Why is Henry all of a sudden like a redneck? Like, let's joust.
Because he's about to die.
He gets a lance through the eyeball.
Yes.
Through his eye. And it took him 10 days to die. So it's not like he got a lance through the eyeball and he was dead. Like, oh, God.
Guys, I have scratched my eyeball before. And I have, like, I took my contacts out one time and my contacts, like, peeled off some skin on my eyeball.
Oh.
That was on my birthday. And that was the most painful thing I have ever been through in my entire life.
Can you imagine?
And ear infection, which is bizarre because
it's going to come up later.
But those two things, I can't handle. Like, poor dude had to have been in pain.
Well, there was no modern day painkillers. I mean, they would have just given him wine for a painkiller, you know?
Like, more wine, put me in a vat of wine, please.
So, we've covered this death 3 times, so we're not going to go too much into it.
He dead.
It was a horrible way to die, but he finally died, and now Mary is Queen of France.
At the age of 16.
16. At the coronation, poor baby Francis, he was, like, so small and frail that, like, he couldn't even wear the crown. Like, literally heavy as the head that wears the crown.
He's falling over wearing the crown.
And so, like, they had to, like, kind of, like, hold it above his head.
I'm like, oh, it's your halo.
And the Guise family is, like, awesome. We are going to run this fucking country now.
Oh, no. This is an absolute opportunity for them to start seizing power.
And it became a huge power struggle between Catherine de' Medici and the Guise family.
Yep.
And you know what? I think Mary didn't expect to really have a big hand in the governance of France. She was consort. She was only 16. So I don't think anybody really bothered her about it too much. And poor baby Francis didn't know what the fuck he was doing.
I mean, you're barely, in modern terms, you're barely able to drive a car.
Yeah.
And you're driving a country.
And now you're like 15, 16, and they're like, here, France is yours now. And he's just like, I don't... Oh, it's a lot of pressure.
So back in Scotland, people are starting to feel like, okay, this is becoming a little too French.
We haven't really touched on it a lot. Scotland was basically occupied by France at this point. Mm-hmm. And the Scottish people weren't in love with it.
No, not at all. So they're trying to push Mary Guise out of this regency and replace her with, Protestants, because that's what they are.
And Mama Mary sends word to France, and she's like, help!
I need somebody help. Not just anybody.
That's exactly how it went.
Now I'm just thinking that Mama Mary, shouldn't her name just be Mother Mary and just make her say, let it be? Let it be. We've had way too many Beatle references in Mary Queen of Scots.
Where is this all coming from?
We're talking about England.
So, Elizabeth was like, she's like still super furious about Mary trying to claim the English throne and everything. She sends English troops in to block France from coming in. Because the Protestant lords had reached out to England and they were like, look, we are sick of all this French shit. And Elizabeth was like, you know what? I'm pretty sick of all this French shit too. And so her forces were able to block the French from coming in.
Which is a big deal.
And helping Mary of Guise. That's how fed up the Scottish were with the French, that they were asking England for help.
Yeah. Like,
and they'd always been enemies.
Say what?
So they sign the Treaty of Edinburgh.
So Francis and the Guise's uncles send these guys to negotiate this thing in Scotland. Mm-hmm. And what they come back with is the Treaty of Edinburgh. And it states that Scotland is now a Protestant country. Mm-hmm. And France can no longer occupy Scotland. And Mary and Francis have to take the English symbol off of their coat of arms.
And Mary and Francis are pissed. They're like, no, we're not going to sign this. And it's like, well, it's kind of already been approved by Scottish Parliament.
You might as well put your signature on it.
So they were she was kind of in a weird state with like her people.
Yeah. So the next year or so after this, it gets kind of sad for Mary Queen of Scots. So Mary Queen of Scots loses Mother Mary. She's no longer speaking to her. Let it be. She did.
She passes away of dropsy in 1560, and I googled like what is dropsy, and I still don't really know what dropsy is.
Just like your internal organs.
You got more fluids in you than you should have.
Yeah, you just drown in your own internal organ fluid.
There's this podcast called Rex Factor, which I'm sure a lot of people that listen to our show listen to, and when they were talking about her dying of dropsy, they were like, "It sounds adorable. Like she keeps dropping something." Like, oh, dropsy. But no, it was not adorable. It was not fun. So people start to like point fingers that the Protestants had her poisoned, but they did an autopsy and they said that there was no foul play.
And it's 1560. Dropsy's a common thing for people to die
just fucking
from.
Died, yeah.
And people died at younger ages.
So she probably wasn't poisoned. But
it's just drama.
There's just going to be drama.
Yeah, there's always drama whenever somebody that's powerful dies.
Yeah.
And Mama Mary was buried in England, but later shipped to France for, her proper formal funeral.
Yeah. She was stolen to France. Like, they snuck her away.
Yeah.
Even though they hadn't been physically together many years out of their lives, Mary was super attached to her mother.
Oh, yeah.
So this was devastating. She grieved her very, very deeply.
So, 1560 was a really rough year for Mary.
Yeah.
She not only did she lose her mother, she lost Francis.
Her husband died. So in the fall of 1560, Francis comes back from hunting and he's like, "I got an earache," and then everyone's like, "You got an earache?" And then he has a seizure, and it was like boom, boom, boom. Like he took a hit. And he had never been super healthy.
No,
but he had this ear infection. Mm-hmm. I've never had an ear infection.
I've had 3 surgeries on my ears because I've had ear infections, and so I can sympathize. There's been times that I've had a fungal ear infection in my ear.
I don't know what that means.
Fungus.
I know what all those words mean.
Yes.
I just put together.
But I went to the doctor like, "Oh, you have an ear infection." So they gave me antibiotics, and then it turned out that the antibiotics actually killed the bacteria that was eating the fungus that was eating my ear. And so the fungus just went, "Yay, Nathan's eardrum is dinner." And then I remember
sorry to laugh.
No, I know. But I remember my ear was leaking. And then one day I touched it and I saw a big pad of skin. That was my eardrum.
Oh my God.
I lost a third of my eardrum that day.
And that's with modern medicine.
And so I was wailing because I was literally not even able to open my eyes because it was just this throbbing. So you know how you can sometimes hear your heartbeat in your ears?
That's all you hear.
Every time your heart beat, it would hurt.
Oh,
and so it was just literally
and so then you can definitely...
So he got a brain abscess. His brain got infected because his ear was infected. It's close to your brain.
I read something super gross. So if you're easily grossed out...
Please tune out.
Fast forward for a second. So, let me tell you something really gross. He had, that abscess that went to his brain, but he had a big boil, behind his ear, too. And so they lanced it, and pus came out of his nose and mouth.
Ooh. Poor dude. That had to have been painful.
So, poor baby Francis took his time dying. A really painful death.
And Mary was heartbroken over this. This is somebody that she was raised around.
I mean, it was...
Yeah. She was 5.
We have no idea if the marriage was ever consummated. He wasn't strong. They were both so young. So she could probably still at this point view him more as a brother than anything. But it's someone she grew up with. It's someone she was very close with. And she
cared for him.
She took it was just a hard year for her. She wrote a poem in her grief that said, "By day, by night, I think of him. In wood or mead or where I be, my heart keeps watch for one who's gone, and yet I feel he's with me."
So she loved him.
Yeah.
I think she really did. Whether or not there was a sexual thing to it, we don't know.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, she was raised around him. She knew the guy.
It's very sad.
Yeah, so she was distraught over this and her mother dying.
Yeah.
Like, that's horrible.
So she attended the funeral, and she stayed in France for about 9 months after that. And then after that...
There's nothing there for her.
There's nothing there for her.
No, and Catherine de Medici was...
She's like...
I mean, she's not as bad as what people paint her out to be.
But she was,
But she's like, bitch, hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more.
Yes. No, well, because once Mary's gone, the Guise problem disappears. Mm-hmm. You know, so she's like, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, girl. Actually, yes, you do have to go home.
Yeah, girl, bye.
Girl, bye. So she's getting ready to move back to Scotland, and she's not thrilled about it because all she's ever been told was like, oh girl, you are so lucky to live here in France because Scotland is a shithole. Scotland is the trailer park of Europe, basically.
And not only that, she has to board another boat and sail across all these seas like she did before, and you know that shit was not comfortable.
And she brought the 4 Marys back with her.
Hey Mary.
So hey Mary, hey Mary,
hey Mary,
hey Mary. So in August 14th, 1561, she departs Calais for Scotland, and she wept. She was mourning the loss of her husband, her mother, and the only home she's ever known.
She's leaving everything behind.
Yeah.
I wouldn't blame her.
Yeah.
I would be like, girl, put your head on my shoulder, girl.
Yeah. She had no idea what was in store for her in Scotland. So she's scared.
She doesn't remember it at all. Like, there's no memory of her in Scotland.
Yeah. But I guess it wasn't a really hard journey because they actually got there a lot earlier than she was expected to. So, yeah, so she gets there, and the people that were supposed to meet her there and, like, take her to her new home weren't there yet because they arrived early. So she just had to, like a local merchant ended up being like, I mean, do you want to come hang out at my house?
I can just see it, like, he sees, like, 10 ships fly up, and he's like...
And they're just, like, sitting there just being like, I think we're supposed to have some people greeting us. And,
then he, like, walks up in his overalls, and he's like, hey, guys!
He's like, hi, y'all are early, so you want to come in? I don't know. Yeah.
So funny.
But eventually, her half-brother James, the Earl of Moray, is that how you say that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Golden.
Huh?
You're golden.
Okay, cool. So, he finally shows up to greet her. So let's talk a little bit about her brother James.
So we talked earlier about how James V had a bunch of illegitimate children.
And this is his oldest illegitimate child.
So he's the king of the bastards.
Yes, he is the king of the bastards. James was Protestant, older, very experienced in politics, and very popular with the people of Scotland.
Yeah.
A lot of people highly preferred James. Like, they wanted James to be king.
Because he probably had a penis, and...
Well, he definitely... Yeah. Probably.
I think that's what it boils down to, really.
Well, also, he grew up in Scotland.
Yeah.
He knew the people.
Well,
people knew him.
But it wasn't her fault that she was shipped off.
Yeah. They were familiar. He was familiar with the customs. He was familiar with the people.
Yeah.
He was Protestant.
Yeah.
So a lot of people really wanted him. So, and very smartly, Mary was like, well, you're going to be my chief advisor.
Genius.
Because you know these people, and I don't, and they like you, and they don't know me, so...
You're my BFF.
You're going to be my right-hand man. And he was, I'm sure, annoyed that he had to now be the right-hand man to a 16-year-old girl. But 17-year-old girl, however old she is at this point. But he was just like, alrighty, I'll do what you say.
Yeah, and that's putting aside his religious differences with her. You know, and
that's,
at the time,
everyone
that's
was very nervous. They're like, we're going to have a Catholic queen. How is this going to go down?
That's a huge thing.
So she rocks up, and he eventually shows up, and he's like, all right, let's head out. We're throwing you a big fucking welcome party. Mm-hmm. So he takes her back to her new home her first home of Edinburgh Castle. According to Google Maps, it looks like the port where they arrived in Edinburgh was only like 14-minute drive. Like today it'd be a 14-minute drive, so it I'm just glad that she didn't have a super long journey.
No.
After the boat ride.
It probably would have been, half a day's work.
Yeah, not super far. Mm-hmm. So, so she arrives, and there's this big banging party planned. Huge banquet. All the lords and ladies that were important were there. And luckily, like we mentioned, she had a very infectious personality. And
she's gorgeous. She's stunning.
Everybody, immediately was just like...
Okay, we love her.
Okay, she's... Yes. She just had, the star quality about her.
Yeah, she did. She always did. Everybody that always met her was always like, oh...
And wow. Everybody just immediately was like, what a relief. We didn't know what to expect from her. Was she going to be crazy? Everybody had heard of Catherine de Medici. Is she going to be, crazy like that bitch? And no, she's nice and bubbly and just wants to get to know everybody. And they're all like...
And they have this huge fucking big party. And
yeah,
it goes on all night.
They loved her.
She's amazing.
So finally, towards the end of the night, Mary leaves to go to bed, and she's like, thank you so much for the warm welcome, thank you. And everybody's been drinking wine, and all these musicians gather under her window, and they play all night. And poor baby Mary just wants to go to sleep.
She's like, bitch,
I'm tired. These musicians just take turns playing love songs for her and all this stuff. And the next morning, bless her heart, she goes down there, and she was just like, that was fantastic. But thank you so much. But she wanted to be like, y'all have been drinking wine all day. Y'all sounded like garbage. I wanted some fucking sleep. But instead, she was like, thank you so much.
What a class act.
Class act, for sure.
So her reception in Scotland, for the most part, was a really positive sort of thing.
And she made it clear from the get-go. She's like, Protestants, I'm not going to make you change your religion.
Yeah. And that's huge.
And they were all like, whew. What a relief.
Because that's
what everyone was scared about.
Yeah, I mean, that's the turmoil at the time is Catholics versus Protestants. Yeah. And for your ruler to come out and be like, I don't care, you're like, awesome.
She did stick out like a sore thumb because she made the court French. And she dressed in the French styles. And she liked French music. And so everybody was sort of like, okay. And she liked dancing. And that's, so she caught some flack for that. But at the beginning, it was good. And she was popular. She's young, popular, rich, beautiful. What could possibly go wrong?
Plenty.
And we'll get to that in our next episode. So thanks for listening. If there's something you want to hear, just hit us up.
You can email us at queenshistorypodcast@gmail.com.
Find us on Twitter. We're at queens_podcast. We're on SoundCloud and Stitcher.
And follow us on iTunes at Queens Podcast, all one word.
All smushed up. Queens Podcast. Follow us on Facebook.
Thanks, guys, for listening.
Cheers.
Bye, girl.
Clink, clink. Mwah.